Hey babies! All right, so you need to give me your model of the lab theater, again, 1/8 inch scale. We went on over last class period. You also need to send me the 10 sketches for today. You need to, as best you can, continue to draw more rounded, more complete pictures, spend a little moment on it, but again, drawing is drawing. So get your hand used to drawing. Whatever it is you sketch is fine. That's all good. Today in class, we're going to talk about Lost in Yonkers. We're going to go through it and talk about the various aspects of the play itself and what are given circumstances and what you need to know and what, for instance, it's upstairs above a candy shop, above an ice cream store. What, as a set designer, do you need to provide that are clues to that fact? Who lives, how many doors are there, how many rooms are there in the house, how much furniture is in the house, all those sort of things are things we're going to discuss in class. And so if you want to provide that information on your own or look it over in your analysis of the script, that would be awesome. What we're really going to talk about today are the various positions, the various people in the production process and what their jobs are and how they relate to you as a set designer. Yes? Now, we're going to start with you as a set designer. First of all, as a set designer, your job is to provide the physical environment. Yes? You're the one who decides, if there are any levels, if there's soft goods around, if you can see backstage, or if you can't, if things are masked, or if they're open. All those are decisions that are in your purview. I'm going to tell you there are 4 functions of a set designer. Yes? The first function is to establish the environment for the play. What's on stage? Is there furniture on stage? Is it just levels? Are there just cubes on stage? What is the physical environment? The second is to support the director's vision of the play and reinforce the themes of the play, the characters in the play. For instance, we just did a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and one of the visions of the director was that it was the power of the flower. And so there were flowers everywhere, yes? There were flowers that were strewn about the floor, there were flowers that were included in the background and the scenery. Costume-wise, there were flowers that were included in the costumes. So again, you're working as part of a production team, but you're working together with whatever the vision the director may have of the play. That's just an example. The next thing you need to do is support the reality of the play. What is the time? What is the period? What is the place? Are we in Egypt in the 5th century BC? Are we on the moon? Are we in somebody's head? Are we in a dream space or in some sort of abstract space? Whatever the reality of the play is, you need to support that with the presentation of what pieces you've chosen. And then the last thing is to create the mood to support the style of the play. Yes. Now, the style of the play, there's 3 basic styles. That's easy. There's comedy, there's tragedy, and there's melodrama. If you're doing a tragedy and you have a whole bunch of funny things on stage, you're not supporting the style of the play. Yes? Vice versa, if you're doing a comedy and you have a whole bunch of very serious things on stage and haven't given you anything to find humorous, you may have missed the mark. So that's what I mean by supporting the style. If you're knowing what kind of play you're doing, and having the elements on the stage that help support that style of production. Yes, if you're doing a musical, for instance, bright and colorful, typically, is going to be the answer. If you're doing something that is morose about death, you're doing Hamlet, it doesn't need to be bright and pink. It needs to be dark and dreary. It's just the nature of the play. Yes, and so that's where, as a set designer, you need to bring those elements into the style of the play as you perform it. Yes? All right, I'm going to give you, these by no means a complete list, but these are 7 visual styles of scenery. The first one is realism, where you attempt to put on stage an environment that you would find in reality. Again, with Lost in Yonkers, you're going to have tables, you're going to have chairs, you're going to have a couch that folds out, daybed kind of thing. You're going to have real doors, you're going to have real windows, you're going to have real water heater. You're going to have, real ice cream they eat, real flashlights they carry around. They're all going to be period. to the 1940s, because again, the Second World War is going on. That's one of the whole things that happens in the play. So those all inform the style and the period of what you're doing, yes? The second style is what I'm gonna call anti-illusionary scenery. In other words, it's sort of the opposite. It's abstract, it's things that are sort of more esoteric in the sense that there's not a reality to put them in. There's, not that they're not real, I mean, you still have real things. For instance, we did a play several years ago. What was the name of the play where it was all in your head and you were the teddy bear?
Helvetica.
Helvetica, where, I mean, the whole play was sort of the idea, there was a lot of ship imagery in the play. And so there were ship wheels, and there was a lot of portals on the play, and then, sort of floating around in the cloud. But it was all, sort of pieces that sort of planted you in places, but the whole set was very much inside this poor lady's head. And she existed both as a child and as an adult in her own head. Yes, and she's sort of, a little schizo, but that's the nature of the play. So, anti-illusionary, which leads us to surrealism. Surrealism, as opposed to anti-illusionary, is sort of grounded, at least still, in some sort of realities. Surrealism is really just out there. It's just dream pieces, dream imagery that have no relationship toward one another. It's just what you find and what you come across in your dreams. Yes, but that's the type of thing that surrealism is. Fragmented scenery is where you have like walls that are cut away, or windows that are cut away. It's just not all there. It's just a piece that will give you an idea that there wasn't a column there, or things like that. Not that the column is in ruins, it's just that you don't have the whole column, because again, especially when you're getting in the round or in thrust, a lot of times things like walls get in the way of people's vision. So a lot of times you'll have to fragment the scenery. Suggested scenery gets closest to that too. For instance, you might just have a cornice, the top cornice of the wall that will be hung, that will suggest the fact that there's a wall there, or a frame of a door, or a frame of a window, but you won't actually have the physical wall there. Again, because for instance, in Tennessee Williams plays, a lot of times, when they're doing Count Hot Roof, for instance, one of the things that's happening is that the rest of the house is trying to see what's happening in that room. And you get a great deal of joy about looking at the people who are not in the room, trying to hear and or see and or peek around. But of course, if there were walls there, you wouldn't necessarily get that idea. But if there's just suggestions of walls, if there's just a door frame, for instance, if there's just a cornice up there, you can still see the people in the hallway that are trying to listen, that are trying to butt in, all that sort of stuff. But it just adds a layer to it, because it's, the offstage action in this instance is just as important as the onstage action. So you might, again, a reason to do fragmented scenery. Suggested scenery, suggested scenery. Again, a play that's based on period. So for instance, if you have a historical play, you might have a wing and drop show that is a periactoise, the way they did it in the 16th century. So again, you might have, I've done some operas like that in Chicago, where you just research the period of the play that was done, and that's what they wanted to do, was a recreation of the drama the way it would have originally been done. Again, I'm not saying it's great, it's just something that's out there. And the last type of style we're going to talk about today is symbolic, where there are things on stage that symbolize, for instance, let's say you've got an altar, you're doing a Greek play where they're all worshiping the gods, and so having an altar on stage would symbolize that God-man relationship sort of thing. But that's the type of thing that, again, you can use it as an example, or you can go a different way. But again, there are many different styles of scenery. Those are just some examples of ways you could take a play that may or may not be supported by the text. Everything should always be text-based when you make those decisions. Cool? All right, here are some, we're gonna talk about working with different directors. Here's a little video talking about what directors do.
On behalf of TVLessonDotCom, my name is Joseph Adler, and I'm producing artistic director of Gable Stage in Coral Gables, Florida. Let's talk a little bit about procedures for directing. Well, obviously, there are as many procedures as there are directors, probably. No two people do things exactly alike, and there's no one technique for anything in theater, despite the fact that that's often what you hear from people who are proponents of this or that technique. You're always hearing people talking about the Meisner technique or the studio. These are all very valid, and they're all great approaches to the craft, and they all work for people, and they're all very useful. However, you know, there are people who are used to working in different ways, and one of the things a director has to learn early on is how to adapt to everybody's way of working. The job is really to choreograph everyone's approach and to take everyone and make them part of the whole. I think, actually, one of the most important aspects of directing is creating an environment during rehearsal where people will feel free to do their best work. That's a place where people have to feel secure, where people can take chances. If actors feel that they can take chances, incredible things will happen. And if you don't make the process the most enjoyable part of the voyage, then you know, there's not much sense to a rehearsal process to begin with. And we're privileged in theater because unlike film, where too often people get introduced and go right into the major scene right after the introduction takes place, fortunately in theater, we get time to rehearse. Now, we don't always get enough time, and that's another factor in terms of a director's procedure. It has to be based on the complexity of the play and the amount of time you have for rehearsal. The average theater, I would say, these days, regional theater, has anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 weeks of rehearsal time. And believe me, that extra week can make a huge difference. So I think it's important that when you look at procedures for directing, you take a look at the way many different people approach the craft. On behalf of TVLesson.com, I'm Joseph Adler. Thank you for watching.
I would say of the people we're going to talk about today, the director has the biggest influence over your interpretation. Again, a director should be open to your suggestions as to how the scenery works with the play. There are those who, however, who are very dictatorial, who very much will say, this is the way I want the play to be. Great. I have had directors who give me their set design, and then I will give them back my set design and say, we can do it your way or we can do it my way. And in most instances, the director says, oh, you know, your way is a lot better because they're not designers and I am. So again, it's better though for me to have a director who has an opinion, an idea, and for them to let me know, because I hate it when directors have ideas and opinions that they won't share. And it's sort of like you're guessing. All right, green was wrong. How about yellow? No. Red's wrong. Oh no. How about pink? No. All right, purple. Oh, great. Why couldn't you just say purple? Oh my God, I went through all this crap and all you wanted to say, oh. Anyway. So your relationship with your director is going to be the most important of the relationships within a production process. The other person you're going to be sort of linked at the hip with is your technical director, whereas the director is going to influence the artistic interpretation of the play. The technical director is going to influence the actual physicalness of the play. And so what your job is really is to take the words of the director and the approach of the director and interpret it so that the technical director knows what stuff to buy and what stuff to build. And you know he'll tell you what the dates of when you have to have all this stuff done by. Here's a little video. Again, it's focused on the assistant technical director, but it's still the same basic idea of how you work together.
I'm Leo Riley, and I'm the Assistant Technical Director for Center Theater Group. At CTG, the ATD turns pretty pictures that the designer gives us into buildable drawings that we can turn into real scenery. In the shop 8 hours a day, and mostly what I'm doing is spending my time in AutoCAD, the software. I'm making construction drawings. I'm keeping track of what everybody's doing, making sure that there's enough material ordered and that everything's going to be done on time. In a couple of weeks, we'll be at the theater loading it in. Different every day. It's equal parts turning art into engineering, also having the logistical know-how to figure out how not to drop the ball on any piece of this project. And then also there's a certain amount of like creativity and flexibility, and also knowing how you can build things well. So it's a good combination of skills and art and craft. I did undergrad at Kalamazoo College, and then I went to the Yale School of Drama for my MFA. I think this is like my first real grown-up job in the field. I did, between undergrad and grad school, I worked an average of 3 or 4 big jobs a year, and freelancing is great, but it's really nice to be able to dig in and work sort of steadily towards, improving at the craft and the art and doing big scenery. The advice I'd give someone is to ask questions about how everything works. I think you don't start looking at like how a door frame works until you start going, wait, but where is this piece and why are the hinges on this side and that side? And that's really what we do, is try to figure out how to make a door look right from 20 feet away.
Cool. Again, sometimes the technical director in some theaters is the highest ranking staff member in that theater. And so you just have to be aware that sometimes the power the technical director wields might be larger than their place in the chain of the pecking order might indicate. The stage manager is another very important person that you're going to have to deal with. The stage manager is sort of your link to the show. They're going to keep you informed about how things change or the way that things need to be altered, because they're going to be at every single rehearsal, and that way you don't have to be. So they'll be sending you notes. But again, here's a little bit of information about stage managers.
Hello, Internet. My name's Nick Acciani, and these are my adventures backstage. This week, I want to start up a section called Who's Who and the Who's Who. Whenever you go and see a show, be it on Broadway, community theater, a high school, you're going to get what's called a playbill. Anyone, no matter how big their role was, what they did for the production, they're listed in the playbill. In here, there's a bunch of jobs that people just don't know. They don't understand. They don't know. Kind of like any job has that. This section is to give a little insight into that, into these jobs. The first role I'm going to start with is one that's relatively overlooked, and honestly, if you're doing the job well, nobody knows you're there. And that is the role of the stage manager. What is a stage manager? What do they do? According to Wikipedia, which honestly has one of the best definitions for it, stage management is the practice of organizing and coordinating a theatrical production. It encompasses a variety of activities, including organizing the production and coordinating communications between various personnel, e.g. between the director and backstage crew or actors and production management. A stage manager is one who has overall responsibility for stage management and the smooth execution of a production. So that's the definition, the basic definition, a decent definition of a stage manager. So I've been lucky or unlucky enough to have worked in both small and larger venues for theater as a stage manager. I'm going to take you through kind of exactly what a stage manager does each step of the way. They start by getting hired. Like any job, you got to go in, interview, get hired. Sometimes they're brought on by the director, sometimes the producer. After you're hired, before the first rehearsal, you take about a week to get yourself organized. That's your prep week. What you're starting to prep is this. This is your Bible. This is your everything. Their official title for this is the prompt book. This book basically holds the entire show, and it's the stage manager's job to compile this book. In that book is the script, blocking, notes on every part of the production. Your first week is organizing that, putting together the entire rehearsal schedule, and getting all the supplies you need. Then the rehearsals start. Their job before each rehearsal starts, is to set up the room. So they've talked to the director, they know exactly what's going to be going on that day in rehearsal, what the director wants to cover. Honestly, I usually give myself an hour because I like to take my time. I don't like to feel rushed. Then the rehearsal starts. Their main job, they have a couple main jobs, is to listen to everything that happens and write everything down. Do they take notes on blocking, which is where the actors are going on the stage? Taking notes on props. Sometimes props get cut, sometimes set pieces get cut, and that happens during rehearsals. On a more administrative side, they're keeping time. It is the stage manager's job to know when it's time for break, how long that break is, and to time that break and call everybody back to start right when that break ends, to make sure that they're letting the director know how soon those breaks are coming up, so they can wrap something up so you're not cutting them off mid-sentence. They get really annoyed when you do that, so don't. After the rehearsal, their job is to clean everything up, put everything away, closing down all the lights. After everything's cleaned up, they get to go home, and then they get to make a report of what happened in rehearsal, so they can let the producers, the director, the designers know everything that happened. So all those notes they took, all that goes into the rehearsal report, as well as actors being late, actors being on time, when breaks were took, son of a took. What happened in rehearsal, what was expected to happen, and what actually did happen in that rehearsal, so that everyone knows where everyone is. Communication is huge. They're that bridge between the director and the designers, the director and the producer and the designers, the producer and the actors. It's like all communication funnels through the stage manager here, from all these people up here, funneling down and then funneling back out. It's a lot of responsibility. But if you're well organized, all that is a piece of cake. And that's basically the rehearsal process. Then you get into tech, which is when the main rehearsals end, right before the show starts, you add in all of the technical elements. And it's the stage manager's job to coordinate all of that. Not only does the stage manager have to take all of those notes that they took before, they're still keeping time. And on top of that, they're getting cues from all of the designers, and they are starting to run the show. So now we've gone through the rehearsals, we've taken all of those notes, we've gone through tech, we've added in all of the technical elements. Now we get to the shows. The stage manager gets there early. Again, they create a sign-in sheet for all the actors and for all their technicians. You have to coordinate with the house manager when the audience is coming in. You have to let the actors know and the crew know how long it is before the start. Generally, you give them a half an hour warning, then a 15-minute warning, then a 10-minute, then a 5-minute, and then you call places, and it's time to start the show. The stage manager, during the show, is to sit in the booth and to call all the cues. They're telling sound when to hit the sound cues, lights when to hit the lights, things flying in and out on stage, they're telling them when to go. And that's why the stage manager is so important. They are the pinnacle. They are starting everything. Everything is running through them. And not only that, they need to know what's happening on backstage. They've given a standby for the lights, and then everything breaks. Something happens backstage. There's a loud crash. The stage manager needs to know what's going on. They have to think on their feet. They have to problem solve on their feet, thinking of plan B, plan C, plan D. You're going to get up to like a plan Y sometimes. It's stressful. It's stressing me out just talking about it. I don't know how I did it for 5 years. Then the curtain closes. Breathe a sigh of relief. They shut down. They help clean up, make sure that everything's put away. And once everything is locked down, they get to go home, and they get to write another report on the performance. Attendance issues, tech issues, anything that broke, just like the rehearsal reports. The performance reports are just as important. To sum all of that up, the stage manager's job is basically the technical running of a show. From start of rehearsals to closing night, they are there to make sure that everything is running smoothly and to run everything smoothly. It takes a very organized person, someone who thrives on taking chaos and making it streamlined. So that about sums up what a stage manager is, what they do, and why they're so important to a show, and why they're in that playbill. So if you like that and want to see more, if you want to see more of these types of videos explaining what things are, give me a nice thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment below, and check back next week, where who knows what I'll be doing next. Nick out.
Yes. Again, always a good stage manager is something to be valued. They're the ones that keep the lines of communication open. So you have to trust your stage manager to be involved and understand your needs as a set designer, yes? And you need to understand their needs. So give them ground plans, give them elevations so that they can know what's coming down the pike. Again, the rest of the design team are people you're gonna have to coordinate with. Costume designer and you and the lighting designer need to be on the same page as far as colors, as far as textures, as far as patterns, that sort of thing, so that one of you is not doing one sort of set and another one's doing another type of colors and another one's doing it doesn't coordinate. Everything needs to be cohesive, and just like we talked about a little earlier with the flowers, if flowers are one part of one element, they need to be a part of another element. Now, having said that, as I may have mentioned this before, but again, you are a part of a recipe, and so one of you may be, for instance, the bread to the sandwich, one of you may be the meat to the sandwich, one may be the cheese to the sandwich, one may be the lettuce, one may be the tomato. Unfortunately, that shifts depending on the play. If you're doing, for instance, if you're doing Peter Pan, flying is the meat. The audience comes to see people fly. If you're doing Singing in the rain is the meat. People come to see it rain on stage. So it depends on the show as to what the most important element may be in the production. But again, typically more than any other thing, the sandwich, you are the bread. You're the thing that holds all the pieces together. Yes, and again, rye bread is different than pumpernickel, is different than wheat bread, is different from white bread. It just changes the nature of the sandwich, and so you need to make sure that you understand what kind of sandwich you're after. Having said that, here's a little bit about what costume designers do.
This might have a little more pizzazz. My name is Emilio Sosa, and I am a costume designer. A costume designer is responsible for the look of the show, and that incorporates everything from the hair, shoes, makeup, and clothing that the actor wears throughout the show. There's no typical day in the life of a costume designer because every day is different depending on what you're doing. Some days are fitting days, which is when we are fitting the actors in the clothing. Some days are shopping days when I'm shopping for the clothing, and some days are just research days. As a costume designer, I do not work alone. I have an assistant. Then we have our tailors, you have sewers, you have artisans. I think the most important skills that you need to be successful as a costume designer is you have to have the art of collaboration. Because like I said, you don't work alone. You're always working with a team. You have a director who has a vision, and our job as a costume designer is to support that vision. You need to be able to like research, because depending if it's a period piece or if it's a current piece, you have to be able to research. Also, you have to be able to handle deadlines and not stress out, because it's a very stressful environment, but you always have to be cool under pressure. And I think that's the most important, attribute, is not to let the job overwhelm you. I have a fashion degree. I studied fashion design in New York at Pratt Institute. So most importantly, I think for anyone in this industry, you have to really figure out how things are made. The fabric you choose is dependent on the design. Not every fabric does the same thing, so you have to have a knowledge of fabrics. One summer, I needed a summer job, and I had a teacher who taught a costume history course who knew of a company that was looking for what we call in the theater a shopper. You shop for threads, fabrics, notions. Whatever you need to create a costume, that's what the shopper buys. I was 21 years old. I had never really known anything about theater. And so I always say theater chose me, I didn't choose it. But it's been over 25 years and it's been an amazing journey. So my first big job was Top Dog Underdog under George C. Wolfe. And that was the show that brought me here to Center Theater Group for the first time many, many years ago. I've been fortunate because I love coming here. I did Porgy and Bess, Immediate Family, Father Comes Home from the War, Part 1, 2, and 3, and now Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So I will always say, go to school, learn how clothing is made, and then go into the business. Because at the end of the day, you're making clothing for people.
Yes. Now, especially if you've got a lot of fabric in your designs, a costume designer and the use of a sewing machine and that sort of stuff can be invaluable to you as well. So there's that aspect as well. Again, the lighting designer is going to be the ultimate decider of what is seen and what is not seen. Sometimes you can plan, for instance, if the scene's going to be particularly dark, the set can be a little brighter because the lights are going to be dim. If the lights are going to be bright, you might need to dim down your set. So again, coordinating with those sort of things are elements you need to work with and understand the approach of the lighting designer. Again, here's a little bit about lighting design.
Welcome to Behind the Emerald Curtain. I'm Lindsay Northen.
And I'm Sean McCourt. Today we put a spotlight on the lighting of Wicked.
The lighting designers collaborate with the creative team to create an artistic and technical process that turned their initial ideas into a beautiful production.
The lighting design for Wicked is sort of really based off of old school craft and technology, and then really specifically focused on the storytelling, telling the audience exactly where to look One of the ways I sort of did this with Wicked is sort of came up with this notion of viewing this world, this Ozian world, maybe through a crystal ball, or maybe through looking down into a jeweler's display cabinet and seeing these two beautiful gems, these two beautiful characters, and just knowing that the light had to emanate from the story that they were telling. After I've got these ideas in my head, you take all that information and you begin to distill it down into how can I achieve these ideas with lighting effects, or develop a light plot so I can have the flexibility in the theater to give a director or a choreographer anything they might need to help create their composition. The light plot is really sort of nothing more than really an architect's drawing.
The lighting plot is the physical representation of where the lights hang in space.
So if it's my job to design the lighting for the show, it's another person's job to implement and technically engineer the lighting for the show. And that fell to Brendan Quigley, our head electrician, and the original production electrician on the show, Bob Fairback.
Some details about a light plot. There are multiple plates, so multiple drawings of Ken's design. So one plate could be just the overhead electrics, for example. And all of those plates have some specific information that we need, including the position, the type of lighting fixture, the gel color that goes in front of it, and just some numbers. We have approximately 650 lighting fixtures with a focus node attached, which means we have to know where it goes.
Basically, once the light plot is in the air, all the light plot does from that point on is become a record of where everything lives. But, for example, when we go to another venue, we use that light plot as a base to then develop the next show.
When the London production was put together, it was the first time that the entire original creative team came together again for the mounting of a new production. Some of the things that they discovered during that process were new to Wicked. The set was outfitted with a green LED array, which looked terrific, and our producers and creative team liked it so much that we decided we wanted to bring it back to the other companies.
So these green LEDs that you see in all the portals, they weren't original to this particular set. But that's the great thing about working on a Wicked is we can continue to reinvent certain parts of it, which is really wonderful, and just continue to enhance the audience's experience. To be part of Wicked is really, for me, I'm sure it will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I think what I love most about Wicked is watching the audience, and you get this thunderous applause. The first time that happened in San Francisco, I was literally like blown away. As a theater artist, that's what we do. That's the payoff.
Cool. Again, there are other designers like sound designers and prop designers. They can become very important, especially prop designers, to your work. Matter of fact, a lot of times you are the major design for major prop elements. It may be you. For instance, if you're doing Little Shop of Horrors, you may be the person who designs the suit that the dentist wears, or it could be the prop design. Yes, it depends on how much you trust your prop designer. Or maybe coordinate between the two of you, yes, but that needs to be decided early, and so you're not having two people work on the same project. The last person we're going to talk about today is the dramaturg. First of all, here's a little bit about dramaturgs.
I've always liked the word dramaturg because nobody knew what it meant. For me, it also implies co-editing, as I do with John Guare, the Lincoln Center Theater Review, which is a literary review that we produce 3 times a year that is sort of an added conversation to the plays we present with our audiences. I also run the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, which is a large-scale project that the theater does for emerging stage directors. When needed, I do sometimes small, sometimes very massive research for actors in productions, if that's called for. So it's a kind of job that can be whatever you make it to be, depending on the needs of your theater and your own interests, I guess. When you're a dramaturg, you work with the director, Mark Lamos, our director, who's working right now in the Grand Manor. The director is in charge of the interpretation, the director's in charge of the room. You're never doing anything the director doesn't know about. Each production is totally different, and that's one of the great things about being a dramaturg. If you look around my office, you'll see piles of books about spirit rituals that I worked on when we did Joe Turner's Come and Gone. along with books about orgasm, which I used for In the Next Room by Sarah Rule. Every 6 months, it's something radically different. This is the ideal job for people who love literature, who speak languages, who understand and love actors. When I go on to a stage and I see a ghost light, I'm a happy person, and that has never ceased. It's a funny combination of characteristics.
Great. The dramaturg is somebody who you can use, and feel free. They love people coming to them asking them questions. But especially if you've got period drama going on and you're not certain, for instance, what kind of table or chair or leg or color or curtain or fabric, that sort of thing was around, or the treatment of the walls. Maybe there's somebody, the dramaturg loves finding stuff out like that. Use them, have them, obviously the earlier you start with them, the quicker they can, or the more time they have to give you information, the more time you have to incorporate it in your design. But a lot of times directors use dramaturgs and not really anybody else. But the dramaturg is available to anybody and everybody on the design team, and I'm, in my experience, are more than willing to work with anybody. First of all, again, one of the first things you and the director need to come up with in the process of designing a show is the scheme for the show. Are we going to have a unit set that we add pieces to? Are we going to have a fully realistic set? Is it going to be a flying wing and drop show where you fly in drops and bring in wagons from the wings? How are we going to approach this play? How are we going to get the scenes that need to happen? Usually, again, with Lost in Yonkers, one set wonder. I'm not saying that you couldn't have a wing and drop show, but you don't need to. There's no wagons that need to change. Nothing changes. Obviously, the way it was written was be realistic, and so I would say that 9 times out of 10, that's the best way to go. Now, can you have suggested scenery? Sure. Can you have symbolic scenery? Sure. But the way it was written and the way it was intended to be done and the way it typically is done, I'm going to say is realistically. So you have, I would say, have pretty good reason to take it out of that. As you work with your research, as you work with your development of your concepts, one of the things you're going to find is that a copy machine or a printer and a computer are your friends, because you can make little quick models, you can make little quick sketches without having to spend lots of time on them, because you can cut and paste and all that sort of stuff. So again, it's just one of those things where until you have a direction, until you have figured out the scheme that you're going for, it's often difficult to start solidifying anything else in the design process. Yes, but again, that's just how you work with everyone else. Unfortunately, for a set designer, you get to go first. Again, lighting designers are going to do the tail end, and costume designers are somewhere sort of in the middle. But as a set designer, you're the one that has to figure out things earliest, because it's going to take the longest for you to get stuff built and painted and put on stage. And so that's just the nature of the beast. Cool. All right, for next class period, let's see. I'm going to give you each a topic of research for Lost in Yonkers. So if you haven't gotten one, just call me or email me, and I will give you a topic for your research for next class period. We'll see you then.